In the heart of Berlin, tucked between the graffiti-stained alleyways of Kreuzberg and the flickering lights of late-night Donner shops, there was a crumbling building known by locals simply as Das Haus. It had once been a factory, later squatted, then legalized, and finally claimed by artists who painted its walls in chaotic color and filled its halls with the scent of turpentine and coffee. It was a living organism of paint and protest, and like most things in Berlin, it wore its scars with pride. And it was there that the cat first appeared. No one knew exactly when she arrived. One day the windows of Studio 9 reflected only the gray skies and cluttered tables, and the next, she was there, perched like a gargoyle on the wide sill, tail flicking, eyes sharp as obsidian stones. The artist who worked in that studio, an aging Greek painter named Nikos Theodorou, claimed she had simply materialized one afternoon in the rain, as if drawn from the ether itself. She was lean and scrappy, with fur the color of soot and ash, and a small tear in her left ear that made her look like a battle-worn prizefighter. But her presence was anything but feral. She watched the world with the unbothered grace of someone who had lived several lives and was in no hurry to finish this one. Nikos had never been a cat person. His art was chaotic and emotional, mostly large abstract canvases streaked with blood reds and deep, sorrowful blues. He drank too much Retsina, smoked cigarettes without filters, and spoke little to anyone but his canvas. Yet, the cat took to him, and in his reluctant way, he took to her. At first, she was just there, a silent silhouette in the window, a ghost that wandered the studio at night and slept on a stack of canvases during the day. Nikos didn't name her, because naming something meant claiming it, and he had never claimed anything he loved. Still, he started leaving out bowls of food. Not proper cat food, sardines, bits of souvlaki, the occasional sliver of spanakopita from the Greek deli down the road. She accepted his offerings with a flick of the tail and the disdainful look only cats can give. Word spread quickly. The artists in Das Haus began to notice her. She'd sometimes wander from studio to studio, inspecting works in progress as if curating a gallery. She sat silently during heated critiques, stared unblinkingly at conceptual sculptures, and once, according to an excited Norwegian photographer named Lena, knocked over a cup of coffee onto a photograph just before it was hung, creating a streak that won the piece second place in a juried exhibition. They called her Minka, then Mona, and finally Muse, a name that stuck like dried paint. She was never seen entering or leaving. She just was. Every morning, when Nikos shuffled in at dawn, smelling of wine and stale dreams, Muse was already there, eyes gleaming from some shadowy corner. Sometimes she meowed once, a sound like gravel in a tin can, and other times she said nothing, just curled her tail around her feet and watched him work. Then came the sketches. Nikos, who had once vowed never to draw a living creature again after a heartbreak in Thessaloniki, began to fill his sketchbooks with her. Her lean limbs, the arch of her back, the haunted look in her eyes. He told no one. He painted as he always had, large, abstract explosions of emotion, but the sketches whispered something else. A different Nikos, a different truth. One morning in late October, Berlin cold enough to bite your bones, a student from the Universität der Künste named Tomas came into the building to interview Nikos for a short film project. Nikos had agreed on the condition that no questions be asked and that Tomas bring wine. As the camera rolled, Muse jumped onto Nikos's shoulder and stared straight into the lens. The moment was magnetic. Within a week, the clip went viral. Not for Nikos's bitter, half-coherent monologue about the death of modern art, but for the cat. The comment sections exploded with theories. Is she his pet? She's a metaphor. No, she's obviously animatronic. She looks like she's judging my life choices. #cat in the studio became a trend. Berliners began visiting Das Haus, hoping to catch a glimpse of the elusive feline. Some came at night with cameras. Others left offerings, fish, toys, handwritten poems. A poet pinned a haiku on the door. Gray watcher of storms, your eyes hold all Berlin's ghosts. Painted in silence. Nikos was furious. He hated the attention. He threatened to paint over the windows, refused interviews, swore in 3 languages. But Muse remained unfazed. She lounged, she slept, she stared. And in her quiet defiance, she became something more than a stray. She became a symbol of independence, of mystery. of that rare, perfect balance between art and detachment. And then, one rainy afternoon, she disappeared. For 2 days, her windowsill was empty. The artists of Das Haus fell into a strange mourning. They posted signs. They searched the alleys. Nikos wandered the building in silence, staring into shadows, calling out in a voice that trembled more than it should have. And just as suddenly as she had vanished, Muse returned. But this time, she wasn't alone. In her mouth was a dead bird, and on her back, a smear of green paint, Nikos's signature shade. She dropped the bird on his canvas, looked at him as if daring him to interpret it, and lay down atop the mess of brushes like a queen claiming her throne. It was then that Nikos painted something no one expected. A portrait of Muse. Realistic, vulnerable, defiant. The painting stunned the art world. It was unveiled quietly, at a small group show hosted in an underground Kreuzberg gallery, and within days, the art world was buzzing. But this was only the beginning. Muse was no longer just a visitor to the studio. She was about to enter the gallery, and become something far greater than any of them had imagined. It was unlike anything Nikos had ever created. Gone were the chaotic brushstrokes, the angry colors, the explosions of grief. Instead, the canvas was hauntingly calm, muted earth tones, delicate lines, and Muse sitting, no, reigning, in the center, half lit by some invisible sun. Her torn ear stood out in stark detail, like a badge of survival. Behind her, if you looked long enough, you could just make out a ghostly outline of the Berlin skyline, faint, almost subconscious, as if the city itself bowed to her. The gallery was an old textile factory turned exhibition space called Kesselraum. Raw brick walls, iron beams, cigarette smoke lingering in the air like memory. It was the kind of place where nothing was hung straight, and everyone drank flat beer and argued about meaning. The show opened on a damp November evening. The cold outside was the kind that rattled your ribs, but inside the gallery, bodies pressed close, wrapped in wool coats and artistic cynicism. They had come for Nikos. Or perhaps for the painting. But really, they had come for her. Muse did not disappoint. At exactly 8:14 p.m., as if by stage direction, she sauntered into the gallery from a back hallway. No collar, no leash, just a streak of sleek, gray confidence. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Some turned to snap photos. Others simply stared, struck dumb by the coincidence, or was it choreography? She walked past abstract installations and cold sculptures without a glance. When she reached Muse number 1, she sat beneath it. Regal, still, untouchable, and for a moment, everything stopped. The cameras didn't flash. The artists didn't speak. The curators held their breath. Nikos, who stood in the back with a glass of Sapporo and a look of exhausted defiance, didn't move either. He watched her as he always had, quietly, cautiously, like you would a ghost that might vanish if acknowledged too directly. "She knows," said a voice beside him. It was Lena, the Norwegian photographer. "She knows it's her. She doesn't care," Nikos said, then smiled faintly. Which is better? From that moment on, Muse was no longer a cat. She was a phenomenon. In the weeks that followed, Muse number 1 made headlines, not for its technique, which critics admired, nor for its origin, which they mythologized, but because of the subject herself. Word spread that Muse had chosen the gallery. She returned daily, like clockwork. Sometimes she slept in front of her portrait. Other times she vanished into the rafters, watching the crowd from above like a silent sentinel. People came from across the city to see her. Not just art lovers, dog walkers, school children, night shift workers, even a woman from a Berlin witch collective who left charms by the radiator. Someone brought a velvet cushion for her to sit on. She ignored it, naturally, and curled up on a pile of old exhibition flyers instead. The gallery owner, Anka Ritter, was a woman who spoke in terse syllables and wore only black. She resisted the temptation to commercialize the moment. No postcards, no t-shirts, no gimmicks. She told anyone who asked that Muse was not property, nor mascot, nor performance art. "She is what she is," Anka said. "And we are lucky she allows us to witness her." Meanwhile, something strange began to happen to the art. Attendance soared. But more than that, so did sales. Pieces that had lingered unsold for months suddenly became the object of bidding wars. Patrons claimed that viewing their chosen works near Muse imbued them with meaning. One buyer paid triple for a sculpture after Muse brushed against it. Another insisted Muse had stared at a painting for exactly 40 seconds and that this was a sign. And then came the rumors that Muse only appeared to those who were true artists. That she slept in front of the painting that held the most truth. That once, just once, she had hissed at a critic and he'd been fired within the week. Nikos hated it. He refused to paint a Muse number 2, despite lucrative offers. He avoided the gallery after the first month. It's becoming theater, he growled. And she is not a prop. But even he could not deny that something had shifted. Not just in the city, but in himself. He began to paint again, quiet, beautiful works filled with light and shadow. Cats appeared in them, yes, but also windows, open doors, the hint of a smile in an empty chair. They were nothing like his old works. They sold fast. He started sleeping better. He cut down on the cigarettes. He kept an old dish of sardines on the balcony, just in case. Muse continued her reign with the unflappable dignity of royalty. Artists began to leave small works for her, charcoal sketches, folded haikus, abstract cats molded from clay. The gallery let them pile in a corner. Someone dubbed it, the shrine. A Berlin startup offered to install a 24-hour live stream of Muse in the gallery. Anka refused. She is not for the internet, she said. She is for here. For now. A month later, she disappeared again. This time for 5 days. Panic bloomed like mold. Tourists left disappointed. Artists lit candles in the gallery corner. The Witch Collective held a moon ritual and burned sage in the alley. Nikos didn't speak to anyone, just stared out his studio window, chain smoking again. And then, on the 6th morning, Muse returned. Through the front door this time. With a single red thread tangled in her tail. She dropped it in the middle of the gallery floor and walked calmly back to her spot beneath the painting. Anka picked up the thread and, without a word, pinned it to the wall with a small placard. It read simply, Muse's thread, untitled, found object. Within hours, a curator from Vienna called to ask if it was for sale. From that day on, Muse's legend deepened. Visitors whispered stories. Artists swore she inspired breakthroughs. One painter claimed he dreamt of her nightly and hadn't touched heroin in a month. Another, a once jaded sculptor, began crafting miniature cat-shaped totems and left one at every train station on the U-Bahn. Muse was no longer just part of the gallery. She was the gallery, a living icon, a ghost who walked among them. And all the while, she remained as indifferent as ever. Watching, waiting, choosing, because she hadn't just claimed a spot beneath a painting. She had claimed Berlin, but something else was stirring in the shadows. Something that would change everything. Because one morning, as the frost began to bite and the breath of the city turned visible again, Anka opened the gallery early to find Muse standing before a blank canvas in the center of the room. And there, smeared in gray paint across the bottom corner, were paw prints. Deliberate, perfect, as if she had made her mark. And everyone wondered, was Muse creating? Winter in Berlin doesn't arrive with a bang, it creeps in. A slow fog of breathless mornings, wet scarves, and the crunch of old ice beneath hurried boots. The city doesn't fight it. Berliners have learned to welcome the gloom. In the alleys behind Kesselraum, the frost hung on the cracked windows like lace. Street musicians moved indoors, the tourists thinned, and the gallery, once crowded with Muse seekers, quieted again. But inside, something stirred. The paw prints on the canvas weren't ignored. At first, people assumed it was an accident, a cat brushing past wet paint. But the marks were intentional. Placed like a signature. Beneath them, a small scratch along the fabric, not torn, not careless, just deep enough to draw the eye. Anka, never one for superstition, stared at the canvas for a long time. Then, for the first time since the gallery opened, she locked the doors and cancelled all appointments. Something was happening. Nikos came 2 days later, summoned by a message from Anka that simply read, "She started it. You should finish it." He hadn't seen Muse in nearly a month. His health had faltered, nothing serious, just the kind of invisible erosion that creeps in with age and regret. His new paintings sold, but he felt hollow inside. Detached. The fire that Muse once rekindled had begun to flicker again. When he entered the gallery, it was dusk. Everything was quiet, save for the hum of the heater and the echo of his boots on the concrete floor. Muse was waiting. She sat beside the blank canvas with the paw prints, her eyes luminous in the fading light. She didn't move, she didn't blink, just stared at him like she was seeing through time. And Nikos, without a word, pulled off his gloves and stepped forward. For the next 3 weeks, the gallery became something no one expected. An open studio, a collaboration between man and myth. The canvas, once empty, filled slowly. People came and went, but no one was allowed to photograph. No one was allowed to speak above a whisper. It was holy ground. Nikos painted during the day, and Muse watched. At night, she remained, often lying directly in front of the canvas. Every few days, a new paw print appeared. Subtle, precise, as if she were correcting him, guiding him. They called it the last exhibition. And no one knew what it was about. By mid-January, the buzz returned. Not the viral storm of the past, but something deeper, more reverent. Poets came and sat for hours in silence. Students sketched in the corners. One dancer, wrapped in wool and grief, performed an impromptu solo while Muse watched, unmoving. Some said the painting was abstract. Others said it was a landscape, or a door, or a storm. No one agreed, and yet, everyone felt the same chill when they looked at it. "I don't know what I'm looking at," said a professor from Leipzig, "but I know it's looking back at me." Muse never left the gallery again. She slept there every night, under the skylight. Snow drifted over the glass like ash, and still she stayed, still and royal, as if waiting for something. And then, in February, it was finished. The unveiling was quiet. Only 30 people were allowed in, friends of the gallery, patrons, other artists. There was no press, no music, no fanfare, just the painting. They called it Muse, the final portrait. But it wasn't a portrait. Not exactly. It was a mirror. Not in the literal sense. There was no silver, no reflection. But when you stood before it, you saw yourself, or rather, something truer than yourself. Memories, regret, hope, all bent through Muse's unblinking gaze. At the bottom, her final paw print. Sealed in varnish, marked forever. And in the corner, Nikos's signature. That night, he gave a short toast. It was the only time anyone remembered him sounding hopeful. "I thought I was painting her," he said. "But really, she was painting me." He died in his sleep 2 weeks later. Peacefully, no pain. The last painting still fresh on the walls. Muse did not attend the funeral. She never left the gallery again. They kept the painting where it was. It never went on tour. Never sold. Anka refused all offers, even when a collector from Tokyo offered $500,000 in cash. "She belongs here," Anka said. So does the work. Visitors changed. Years passed. But Muse remained. Until one spring morning, when Anka opened the gallery and found her gone. No open window. No paw prints. No trace. Just the painting. And a single gray hair on the windowsill. Some say Muse returned to the city. That she now walks unseen across rooftops and back alleys, slipping through the cracks of Berlin like wind through wire. Others claim she was never a cat at all, that she was the ghost of some forgotten artist, or the soul of the city itself. A fragment of old magic. A whisper of something we no longer understand. There were no more paw prints after that. No more sudden appearances. No more miracles. But at Kesselraum, the shrine remains. The thread, the sketches, the offerings, and Muse, the final portrait. Still hanging, still watching, waiting. Because every now and then, late at night, when the city is asleep and the heaters hum, the gallery lights flicker. And if you're lucky, really lucky, you might swear you see her shadow pass across the floor. Tail high, eyes bright, as if to say, art never dies.